17-story Presbyterian hospital in Oakland. City officials, including Mayor Ed Gainey and Allegheny County Executive Rich Fitzgerald, were among those in attendance during Tuesday's groundbreaking ceremony. UPMC says that the 17-story facility will have 636 private patient rooms and will deliver specialty care, including transplants, cardiac surgery, and neurosurgery. The existing UPMC Presbyterian Hospital was built more than a century ago. The new facility will have an entirely different look. The exterior will be made of patterned glass, and doctors say that it's not only eye-appealing, but it's also beneficial to patients' health. A former Beaver County resident pleaded guilty in federal court yesterday to violating the federal narcotics and firearms laws. 49-year-old Michael Turner, formerly of Wampum, entered the guilty plea of distributing 5 kilograms or more of cocaine and possessing a firearm by a convicted felon before United States District Judge Stephanie Haynes. In 2019, agents with the FBI and other agencies investigated drug trafficking activity in Pittsburgh's Hill District neighborhood and elsewhere. As part of that investigation, agents conducted court-authorized interceptions of telephonic communications over 2 telephones used by a co-defendant between February and May of 2020. During that time, agents intercepted communication with Turner regarding the purchase of kilogram quantities of cocaine, which he distributed to others. Turner also admitted to unlawfully possessing a .223 caliber rifle and ammunition, which was seized from his Beaver County residence during a search on June 18th of 2020. Turner is a felon and is prohibited from owning a firearm. He is scheduled to be sentenced on October the 27th of this year and faces not less than 10 years and up to life in prison, a $10 million fine, or both. Pending sentencing, Turner is remaining in the custody of U.S. Marshals.
Here's the Beaver County forecast on 95.7 and 99.3 FM, along with 1230 WBVP, 1460 WMBA, and streaming at beavercountyradio.com.
There's a chance for an isolated shower or thunderstorm sometime this morning. Otherwise, it's going to be mostly sunny, hazy, hot, and humid. High's going to be 94 degrees. There is a heat advisory in effect from 11 a.m. this morning till 9 p.m. tonight. Heat index values could be as high as 104 degrees. They are recommending that you stay indoors today in the air conditioning, but if you do have to go outside, try to keep your activity to the morning time or the evening. And if you do need to go out and do some type of activity, make sure you stay hydrated. Otherwise, overnight tonight, a chance of showers and thunderstorms mainly towards morning, low down to 74 degrees. Afternoon showers and thunderstorms likely tomorrow after 5 p.m. with a high of 92 degrees. That'll set us up for a beautiful weekend. Friday, sunny skies, high 83. Saturday, sunny and a high of 72. And then Sunday, mostly sunny with a high of 75 degrees. That is a look at the news for now. I'm Frank Sparks, Beaver County Radio News, 95.7 and 99.3 FM, presented by St. Barnabas, 1230 WBVP, 1460 WMBA, and beavercountyradio.com.
Now, it's time to talk on Teleforum on Beaver County Radio, 1230 WBVP, 1460 WMBA, 99.3 FM, and beavercountyradio.com. And now, here is the host of the show, Eddie Crow.
.1230 WBVP, 1460 WMBA, 99.3 FM, presented by St. Barnabas, 95.7 FM, streaming live at beavercountyradio.com, on the app. It's all covered for you. It's hour 2 of Teleforum. Thank you to Dale. Dale Reckless of MRS Physical Therapy was my first guest for the first hour. Joining me in this hour, I learned a long time ago, well, I was told a long time ago, I eventually learned it. If you have questions about something and you don't understand it, get a hold of somebody that understands it. So, Stephen, I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm going to ask you a lot of stupid questions, okay? Stephen is your professor, maybe. Stephen Roberts is a professor at Geneva, and you teach economics. And first off, welcome, and thank you for coming in, and thank you for schooling me up on stuff I know nothing about, because that's what we're going to do today, okay?
Thanks for having me.
All right. What is inflation? I don't know what it is. I just know a lot of people are screaming about it, and I know when I buy sandwiches, they cost more now. Explain to me what you teach your kids at Geneva when they say, Professor, what is inflation?
Yeah, inflation is when you have a price increase basically across almost every single market. So it's not uncommon to have, a price increase in one market or another. That's not sufficient to be inflation. But inflation is when each different product, each different market, basically across the entire economy, is seeing prices start to rise. And so an individual dollar, or these days you have to say an individual $100 or $1,000, doesn't buy quite the same amount of goods and services that it did previously.
What causes it to go from one or two things to everything? Because one of the words that I do know is collusion, and that sounds like a whole lot of different industries getting together and saying, if we all raise our price, it's all going to be okay. Is that conspiratorial? What causes everything to go versus one or two things to go up?
I would say it's not collusion.
It's not collusion?
It's not collusion. It's not a conspiracy. In fact, I know an economist that likes to say, if you see something like inflation, it's evidence that there's not collusion, because if there was collusion, we wouldn't have to wait for circumstances to change for us to all raise our prices. So inflation is usually a response to something outside of each market that's impacting all of these individual markets simultaneously.
Okay, Stephen Roberts is my guest. He is an economics professor at Geneva College. What is the outside thing that's impacting everything? Because as a professor, whether it's econ or anything, I know you pay attention to the news. What's causing this? The stickers say it's Joe Biden.
So that's an excellent question, because there are lots of different answers. And in my class, I leave it a bit ambiguous, because I think there are 3 or 4 different things that you can point to, and people will emphasize different things. So kind of going in chronological order.
Okay.
The first big thing is a big increase in the money supply that happened during 2020 and to a lesser extent 2021.
You're talking about all the free money that everybody got sent.
Not exactly.
Okay.
That's technically.
This is why you're here, Stephen. This is why I had to take econ twice. Okay, that wasn't it. Where did all the new money affect? One
of the most common misconceptions, which is not limited to you, but is very common in the public, is to think that when we get stimulus checks or things like that, that's expanding the money supply. And it's technically not directly, because the government will borrow money in order to do that. The institution that's in control of our money supply is the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve put a lot of new money into the economy by buying up bonds, by making it easier for banks to loan, by cutting how much banks had to hold in their own reserves. And so the money supply grew by about a third over the course of just about a year. So that's a massive increase, and we would expect to see prices increase as the amount of money that's flooding into the economy has increased. Now, you mentioned the stimulus checks, and people will say that that's also a factor as well, because one of the questions is, how much are people willing to spend? If you give people a lot of extra free money, then you might see that demand across the board goes up, because suddenly I have $1,200 or $2,400 that I didn't have before, and I'm willing to make that extra purchase. And if you have millions of people around the economy doing that, then suddenly the competition for the goods and services that we can produce becomes more and more fierce, and those prices start to rise. So
did that have anything to do with why the housing market has gone through and just astronomically through the roof? Was that part of that reasoning?
That might have been a little bit, but the other piece is actually going back to the Federal Reserve. So one of the things that the Federal Reserve does, especially in what they think are going to be trying economic times like the start of COVID, is they try to keep interest rates as low as possible.
Okay.
So what they do is they provide a lot of additional money to the banking system, to the financial sector of the U.S. economy, and that makes it so banks can make more and more loans, and that's part of how the money supply throughout the economy increases. Now, if you have incredibly low interest rates, what you've done is you've made it much, much cheaper for individuals to afford a home. I actually did the math on this a couple days ago. If you compare...
Wait, back up. Were you sitting at home now? Was this for a class that you were going to teach, or did you just say, I feel like doing some math at home? Go ahead. Admit it.
More the latter.
Okay. So you're sitting at home, you're going, I'm going to do some economics math. This is why you're an economics professor. Okay.
Absolutely. So
what did the math say?
So I'm hearing all these people complaining about home prices, and one of the questions that I think about that almost never gets addressed in articles about home prices is the impact of interest rates. So 3 years ago, I bought a home in in Beaver Falls, and the interest rate for me was about 4.5%.
Okay.
Then 2 years later, in the midst of COVID, I refinanced because interest rates had dropped to about 2.5%. And now interest rates for home loans are somewhere around 5.5, 6%, and probably about to, actually, they probably just jumped again with the most recent Fed announcement. So those numbers are probably already out of date. So the difference between the kind of interest rate that you could get in the midst of COVID and what you were getting several years before and what you're probably going to be getting now and in the months to come is something like the ability to afford. So I did kind of the base as a $250,000 house. If you looked at a mortgage payment on a $250,000 house in, say, 2018, 2019, and compared it to the mortgage payment in early 2021, you could have afforded a home worth something like $340,000.
All right.
Exact same monthly payment. And so people can afford to pay more for a home because their mortgage bill isn't actually going up as long as these interest rates are being kept low.
It's supposed to happen today, and I honestly hadn't been able to see if it's happened. The Feds were going to raise the interest rate, and that was going to make inflation better. Would you, as an economics professor, walk me through how that would be the case and why they're telling me that and why they're going to raise the interest rate using that as a justification?
Absolutely. I just got done teaching a couple courses in macroeconomics in the spring, and that question was the one that I tried to hammer over and over and over again because I think it's probably the most important question in understanding what the Fed's been doing at least for the past 15, 20 years.
Okay.
So what the Fed can do to lower interest rates is they can either buy government bonds, thus putting additional money into the banking system, or they can make it easier for banks to lend out. And so all of those things, when the banks have more money, when the banks have, say, less penalty if they have to borrow money from other banks or if they have to borrow money from the Fed, those are all encouraging lots of loans that keep the interest rate low. But what that does is it greatly increases the amount of money that's in the nation's money supply. And so that means inflation. So low interest rates, lots of money circulating, lots of money in the money supply, inflation is the result. So what can the Fed do to reverse that? Well, all the policies that they pursue to kind of take money out of the money supply, or at least slow how much the money supply is growing, all of those are going to force interest rates to rise. And so what the Fed does is they set a target saying we're going to take out enough money that the interest rate is going to go up by 25 points or 50 points or 75 points, which is, I think, what people think that they're going to be announcing this week is that 75-point rise.
Okay. And then what happens?
So then
we all freak out and everybody has front page news about it. And then the next day, what actually happens from the economic standpoint?
Okay. So on the money supply front, then the Federal Reserve starts taking money out of the money supply. In fact, it's already decreased just a tiny, tiny bit, I think by about like $100 billion or something like that in the last few months.
Just a tiny bit.
Yeah, well, when you're talking about a base of around 25 trillion, $100 billion is
That's the stuff in my couch.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
It's a rounding error. So we would expect to see another little drop like that. So we're not only slowing the rate of growth, but we're actually seeing a little bit of a drop in the overall money supply. And so with less money circulating, we're hoping to see that inflation start to get under control.
Hopefully.
Of course, that comes with potential negative consequences, as we're already seeing on the stock market side of things.
Okay. That's perfect. That brings me to my next question. Professor Stephen Roberts is my guest. He teaches economics and things that I don't understand. He's a professor at Geneva College. Explain to me why the stock market, which I know a lot of people that have no money in the stock market at all, why is their life affected when the stock market goes up and down?
I think one of the biggest reasons is the stock market is a bit of a barometer about how people are feeling about the overall economy.
Okay.
Because a lot of times the actual economic impact of the stock market going up and down isn't so much a major contributing factor to any changes, but it is kind of, you can think of it as being a bit of a weather vane, saying what direction do most people that are dealing with business and finance and investing, what way do they think the economy is going? And so when you see persistent drops in the stock market, it's signaling some pessimism, and that can impact especially what businesses do. Do businesses choose to invest more? Do they choose to hire more? Or do they kind of get into a bit of a holding pattern? Do they choose to cut hours or lay people off or avoid hiring more? And when that happens, then you can start to get into a bit of a recession as businesses become very nervous about the future.
Is a business going to make hiring decisions based on the stock market more than on the demand of, say, the product that they make?
Not necessarily, although, once again, this is where the interest rate starts to come into play. If you look at a lot of business investment, it's heavily dependent on what the interest rate is looking like. So as the Federal Reserve starts to increase...
Give me an example. Well, buying a home, being a realtor, how you do has a whole lot to do with interest rates.
Certainly.
Okay.
And for even more traditional businesses, expansion is often financed by borrowing, right? I want to borrow $10 million for a new location. If I have to pay 2.5% interest, that's pretty cheap. If I have to pay 6% interest, maybe it's time to wait.
Hold on, right.
So we don't expand production. We don't replace our machines. We slow down production, things like that. And so interest rates, as they start to rise, often lead to these sorts of falls that we've seen in the stock market because businesses say, well, this is not the time to expand operations, to engage in any sort of expensive project, and instead we're just going to kind of wait. And when that happens, people start to get concerned about the overall condition of the economy.
What would you tell somebody if they're thinking about investing in the stock market? You're allowed to give them one piece of advice. I come to you and I say, Professor Roberts, I've got $1,000, or that ain't going to get much. I've got $10,000 and I'm going to invest in the stock market. I want you to give me one piece of advice other than telling me a good or bad stock. What a general piece would it be?
So if I only get one piece, the one piece is diversification.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, don't do it. Okay.
No, diversification. So don't put all of your money into one stock. Where you see people who are really hit hard, especially in the long run, is people who have been very invested in one or two particular stocks, and that stock goes under and they're left with nothing. One of the examples I've heard of this is people who worked at Enron. They had their life savings in Enron stock, and when that company went bankrupt, they lost everything. So diversification is number one.
What do you do? Nothing? You're just too bad, so sad. You're now broke?
I mean, there's not a whole lot to do in that situation if you put all your money in one stock, because that's kind of the risk that's involved. So you can spread that risk, and if you look at the stock market over any set of decades, a well-diversified portfolio gets a reasonable return. But the person that puts all their money into one or two stocks, they're the ones that are at serious risk.
There's no checks or balances. There's no, the government loves to bail everybody out. They're not going to help me out if I just had all of my life savings in a stock that went belly up.
Not really.
No, just too bad.
Pretty much.
All right. Well, that's certainly depressing. I've got more questions for Stephen. Stephen Roberts is a professor of economics at Geneva College. I haven't even gotten to the crypto questions yet. We'll do that after this. It's Teleforum on Beaver County Radio. This is being live streamed. If you'd like to post a question in the comments section, the first comment, Stephen, is the reason the economy is so messed up, it's because of the Democrats. He wrote rats. I'll ask you about politics and econ after this.
The best of Beaver County is easy to discover. It's right here on your radio. Tune in Beaver County Radio or watch the Best of Beaver County live on Facebook or YouTube video this and every Thursday from 11 to 11:30. The program is made possible by St. Barnabas. For over 3 years now, the show has been dedicated to shining light on the great things going on right here in your neighborhood and the people that are making it happen. This Thursday, enjoy conversation and insight from an intriguing lineup of guests who are creating excitement and having an impact right here in Beaver County. Your friends and neighbors at St. Barnabas are pleased to support the Best of Beaver County. The radio broadcast will also be replayed each week from 11:30 to noon on Sundays on Beaver County Radio. Archived Best of Beaver County videos can be viewed on the WBVP WMBA Facebook page. It's your chance to encounter the best of Beaver County with host Mike Romai this Thursday starting at 11. For more information, visit beavercountyradio.com.
Hot summer nights might be perfect for cruising, but not so much for sleeping. Keep the heat outdoors where it belongs, and that means a service call and checkup of your home's air conditioning system from Beaver Valley Sheet Metal. Click BVSM1.com. Call 724-775-7300. BVSM Heating and Air Conditioning is your certified HVAC company serving Beaver County into its 7th decade. PA number 3285.
Hi, folks. I'm with our good friend John Diagardi from Roe Monument. John, you were telling me earlier that people really should not rush into choosing a memorial for their loved one. Now, why is that?
We found that families need to take ample time to grieve first. Grief is not something that we get over, but rather something that we learn to live with. So the length of time to grieve varies from person to person.
You mentioned that the monument can't be placed right away.
That's right. There are certain things that need to take place before a monument can be installed. So it's really worth taking time to think about how to plan and design a memorial that truly reflects a person's life. It's actually a healing activity that helps to alleviate grief.
John, this makes a lot of sense.
It does, and when the time is right to proceed, not only can Roe Monument help families choose and design their memorial, we can help them save as much as 50% by eliminating the middleman.
Thank you, John. Folks, you can learn more simply by visiting RoeMonuments.com.
Friendly Federal Credit Union is honoring graduates this month. Forget the fancy gadgets, jewelry, or lavish parties. Get your graduate a gift that will provide numerous benefits. A graduate account at Friendly Federal Credit Union. This is Cindy Hiladio. Graduate accounts at Friendly Federal include free checks, a $500 credit limit Visa card with approved credit, online access, great personal service, and a debit card tied to the account. Here's the great news. I've got applications for you and your graduate. Your student has until the end of this month to apply for the annual Anthony S. Payne and Carl D. Ross Memorial Scholarships. While they're doing that, you can apply for a low 2.75% home equity loan. Available now with approved credit. Visit Friendly Federal Credit Union for more information or click friendlyfcu.org. It's the place that makes more sense for you. Equal Housing Lender, member NCUA.
Beaver County Radio's news source, 95.7 and 99.3 FM, along with 1230 WBVP, 1460 WMBA, and streaming at beavercountyradio.com. Here's Frank Sparks.
And good morning. Today's forecast is calling for isolated morning showers and thunderstorms. Otherwise, it's going to be mostly sunny, hazy, hot, and humid today. High's going to be up to 94 degrees. There is a heat advisory that will be in effect from 11 a.m. this morning till 9 p.m. tonight, as they are saying heat index values could be as high as 104 degrees. Also recommending that you stay indoors today unless you have to go out. And if you do have to go out, try to limit your activity to early morning or late evening as well. We'll have a complete Beaver County Radio weather forecast coming up after we have this news. Beaver County Radio News correspondent Sadie Giordano is reporting that Ambridge Police, in collaboration with 16 local businesses from 4th to 11th Streets, are providing drink stations to help keep your pets hydrated when walking your pets this summer. You can stop by one of the following businesses: the Older Genius, the Chapel Thrift Shop, Lickety Splits, Stangle's Bakery, Off the Hook, Vape Roll With It, the Dollar General, Heritage Floral Shop, Merchant Coffee, New Alliance Federal Credit Union, God's Fields Outreach Ministry, Bridgetown Tap House, 8th Street Sunoco, the Huntington Bank, Little Athens, and Tom's Old Country Store. Now, if there's any other businesses that are interested in bowls to set up a drink station for pets, you can call 724-266-5977, and one will be delivered to you. Police will visit businesses on Duss Avenue and Church Street in the near future to deliver the bowls to the businesses that chose to participate. A thank you is extended to everyone that is participating in keeping our furry friends safe and healthy this summer. Pennsylvania State Representatives Josh Kell, Torrin Eckert, and Tim O'Neill noted yesterday that an incredible outpouring of support from the public and fellow members of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives in efforts to ensure the laws are enforced in Philadelphia by the willful misconduct of District Attorney Larry Krasner. The trio said via release, in the 24 hours since we announced our intention to file the articles of impeachment against Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, there has been an outpouring of support and helpful information submitted to the website Stop krasner.com. We are also pleased that many members have already signed as co-sponsors for the forthcoming articles of impeachment. On Monday, Pennsylvania Senator Democrats made a motion for the Senate to vote on a discharge resolution that would move Senate Bill 134 out of committee and to the floor of the Senate for a full vote during session. State Senate Republicans blocked the resolution with a unanimous no vote. Senator Wayne Fontana from Allegheny County, who is the author of the legislation, expressed frustration and disappointment in the inaction by their colleagues on the other side of the aisle.
Isn't this timely and appropriate right now in Pennsylvania and all through our country to bring up a bill like Senate Bill 134, which is the Extreme Risk Protection Order bill? This bill isn't about taking guns away from anybody that shouldn't have them. I mean, if you're a law-abiding citizen, that's fine. But if you're someone that's mentally ill, that has issues, why shouldn't there be a process to take that gun away?
Now, the audio is courtesy of Senator Fontana's office. President Joe Biden is calling on U.S. oil refiners to produce more gasoline and diesel. In a draft letter to refiners, Biden says their profits have tripled during a time of war between Russia and Ukraine as Americans struggle with record high prices at the pump. Biden writes that the oil companies need to work with his administration to bring forward near-term solutions that would address the crisis. Gas prices nationwide are averaging roughly $5 a gallon. That's an economic burden for many Americans and a political threat for the president's fellow Democrats going into the midterm elections. Biden's message that corporate greed is contributing to higher prices might resonate with voters.
Here's the Beaver County forecast on 95.7 and 99.3 FM, along with 1230 WBVP, 1460 WMBA, and streaming at beavercountyradio.com.
There's a chance for an isolated shower or thunderstorm sometime this morning. Otherwise, it's going to be mostly sunny, hazy, hot, and humid. High's going to be 94 degrees. There is a heat advisory in effect from 11 a.m. this morning till 9 p.m. tonight. Heat index values could be as high as 104 degrees. They are recommending that you stay indoors today in the air conditioning, but if you do have to go outside, try to keep your activity to the morning time or the evening. And if you do need to go out and do some type of activity, make sure you stay hydrated. Otherwise, overnight tonight, a chance of showers and thunderstorms mainly towards morning, low down to 74 degrees. Afternoon showers and thunderstorms likely tomorrow after 5 p.m. with a high of 92 degrees. That'll set us up for a beautiful weekend. Friday, sunny skies, high 83. Saturday, sunny and a high of 72. And then Sunday, mostly sunny with a high of 75 degrees. That is a look at the news for now. I'm Frank Sparks, Beaver County Radio News, 95.7 and 99.3 FM, presented by St. Barnabas, 1230 WBVP, 1460 WMBA, and beavercountyradio.com.
Talk about what's happening in Beaver County or around the world on Teleforum, 724-843-1888, 724-774-1888. It's Teleforum with Eddie Crow.
It is Teleforum. I am having a wonderful conversation, and in spite of that, I'm also learning. My guest is Professor Stephen Roberts of Geneva College. He is an economics professor, and he's schooling me up on bull markets and bear markets and such. But off the air, we were talking. You and I have run in a whole lot of the same geographical locations. Explain your educational background. You're a professor at Geneva College now, but how did you come up?
Yeah, so I started at Purdue University. I actually started in computer science and discovered I didn't like it very much. But I took an econ course, kind of against my will. My dad was like, you should take an econ course. And I just remembered being bored by it in high school.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I don't know what to take for my last class. So I took it. And
it was an elective to fill out your schedule.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just took the class. I bought the textbook, and I found myself reading the textbook outside of class for fun. So that tells you what kind of what kind of nerd I am. Yeah, that I enjoyed the textbook. I enjoyed the class, and like 6 weeks into the semester, I was like, all right, Dad, you were right. I'm switching my major. And so I got my bachelor's at Purdue, and then I went to University of Arizona in Tucson, and I got my master's and PhD in economics there.
And you were talking about somebody in your family went to IU, which is Indiana University. I went to Purdue. My sister went to IU. And you were at Kentucky Wesleyan?
Yeah.
Okay. For the people that don't know, Kentucky Wesleyan is literally right across the bridge from where my mom lives. You've literally driven past my mother's house.
Yep, sounds like it.
It's a small world, and I got to be honest with you. I know that route. There's nothing in that route that makes me look up and go, ooh, I want to learn about economics. What drew you to it? What made you actually commit to buying the textbook?
I think what I liked about economics was just the logic of it all, how it kind of made sense. And in some sense, it was how I naturally thought. It was like finding other people that spoke my language.
Is that what it was? You look around, it's like, okay, and you said yourself you're kind of a nerd?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, these nerds are kind of like my nerdness. Okay, good. Yeah?
Yeah, I think originally I thought I wanted to do law, and that wasn't really... And there are aspects of it I like, and I like math a lot, but I didn't really want to be pure math. Economics combines a lot of things that I find interesting into one complete package.
All right, explain to me what a bull market is and what a bear market is, because I'm seeing those words in sentences, and all I know is that's two animals that I don't want to deal with. One's good and one's bad.
Yeah, so a bull market is good, at least if you're invested in the stock market.
Okay.
Although it's usually indicative that the economy as a whole seems to be going well and people are optimistic about the current economy.
People are buying into the vibe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you see stock market prices rising. If you've been holding stock, that's a great thing. If it's encouraging businesses, if they're looking and saying people are optimistic about this economy, they're going to be buying more. We should start expanding. We should start selling more. We should start hiring more. That can lead to this kind of positive cycle where the economy starts growing, unemployment goes down as businesses are willing to hire more and more, and there's kind of a general feeling that the economy is headed in the right direction.
How about you? You talked about one of the reasons you like teaching economics is the logic of it. When you talk about the stock market and what you just described, the bull market, everybody's buying into a notion. Does that not, in a way, go against logic? They're going on their emotions rather than logic with their decisions and their investing.
That's an excellent question, and that's there's been a bit of a refinement in economics towards that general direction of trying to understand the psychology of things like investment. There's a very popular book written by a well-known economist called Animal Spirits, which is talking about how the stock market in many cases is responding to not so much the real economic indicators that we might normally expect, but it's responding to people's psychology, people's emotions in some cases, or their overall expectations, which may or may not be logical. And so that's why earlier you had asked about, is the stock market telling you something real? How much should we be concerned about the stock market? Well, in some cases, the stock market doesn't reflect reality because people have biases and people have mistaken notions that things are going well and going poorly that eventually get corrected. And so not every movement of the stock market is indicative of something that's really happening in the economy.
When you watch the stock market and people go up and there is a reaction here or there, how often as an economist do you go, yeah, that makes sense? And how often do you go, what are you guys doing?
I think in terms of how often does it make sense, maybe 20, 30% of the time.
Does it?
I think a lot of, especially the day-to-day, week-to-week, and even sometimes month-to-month variation of the stock market is driven a lot more by emotions, by one particular, it could be a tweet, right? Somebody influential makes a tweet.
Elon Musk.
Right. Elon Musk can single-handedly change the stock market, change all these other markets by what he tweets in favor of or against. And when I see that, I see that the stock market's not behaving in any sort of rational or predictable fashion.
Jerry posted a question in terms of affecting the economy. What are your thoughts on, he phrased it excessive profit tax, but I go ahead and use the monopoly term, windfall tax. You look at the profits that the oil companies have posted over the last 3 or 4 quarters. What would a windfall tax do positively and negatively, besides have people lose their minds and, mobile oil drops for one day?
Yeah, and I think that would be the first effect.
Yes.
You would see that sort of drop.
Unless Elon Musk said it's okay.
Yeah. I think on the negative side, one of the concerns is that you may be stifling investment because part of the entire process of investing by, say, an oil company or others is the expectation that maybe there's going to be really high profits. That's factored into the decision. And that might be because we bought an oil field that had more than we expected, or it could be because prices increase more than we expected. And so if you start to change that calculation or that expectation, the concern is that businesses don't necessarily engage in costly investment. So then maybe they choose to invest a little less, produce a little less, and then you get in a position where the supply isn't where you would want it to be. I guess the positive side is mostly that could go into the budget. We've run very significant budget deficits for 20 years, and even more significant budget deficits for the past 2 or 3 years. And so if you're trying to come up with a way to balance the budget without as directly impacting the average consumer, that maybe has the potential to do so.
Do you believe there's any real motivation to balance the budget? Because what you just said, there's been a deficit for X number of years. There's been a ridiculous deficit the last, half of a decade. You hear people say we got to balance the budget. Do you really believe that there is a true motivation to do that?
I think that at some point there is the concern that the debt will become unmanageable. The problem is nobody knows where that point is.
Okay.
It's like driving towards the edge of a cliff. Everything goes well until you're over the cliff. And since we don't necessarily know where we've blown by some of the markers that people thought were the cliff. Some people said once your debt is 100% or 80% of your GDP, that's a problem. We're at like 130% right now, or actually that was 6 months ago.
It's worse.
So it's worse, right?
Yeah.
I keep thinking about the statistics from the last time I calculated them for my class, and that's out of date a few months later. So it's probably higher than 130, maybe around 140%.
So as a country right now, we're losing 140% of what we're making?
No, our total debt right now is 140% of our GDP. So if and this is kind of a ludicrous example, but if you could tax everything and not change people's behavior, so people still went to work even though they lost everything in taxes,
right,
it would take us almost a year and a half of basically taxing all profits, income, money in the country to pay off our debt.
Who do we owe the most to?
Ourselves.
Well, then, okay, forgive me. We can't do that. You're the professor. Can you do that? If the United States owes the most money to the United States, can the United States not go, nah, man, I'll get you next time, it's cool?
Well, so when I say ourselves, there are a couple different groups that are involved in there.
Of course.
The biggest group is individual people. I still have a few government bonds that my father bought for me when I was a child,
mm-hmm,
and they get a much better interest rate than anything in the last 20 years, so I haven't cashed those, although they're about to come due. So there's lots of people like me that have government bonds, and we expect to be repaid. And if we're not, then in the future, nobody's going to trust the government. And lots of businesses will have some of their excess profits. If they're not having a use for them right away, they might put them in government bonds, banks and others. So lots of people will store their money in government bonds that they're expecting to get repaid. Now, another group that has a lot of government bonds is the Federal Reserve. And they're a group that maybe could do what you're talking about. But
we forgive us.
Right. So the Federal Reserve is technically a separate independent entity from the federal government. And so there's a question of what can the Fed do? And by the way, the Fed has far more bonds at this point in time than they have had at any point in history. I think the number was around 5 or 6 trillion in debt. And so they could potentially choose to forgive that.
All right, I'm going to ask a stupid question. That's why I invited you here. Is that not talking about what the Federal Reserve, it's not a federal agency, it's just called the Federal Reserve, right? If you can take money out, is that not like saying, I'm going to take money out of the till, but I'm going to write an IOU and put it in there, and since it's my till, I technically owe myself whatever I put in there, and I don't have to pay? Am I oversimplifying that? Because it sounds like they can borrow from themselves without any real repercussions.
Well, I think our current inflation rate would suggest it's not without real repercussions.
Well, okay, without real repercussions to them.
Correct.
We're paying.
So, and that's why sometimes they'll refer to an inflation tax. That one of the ways inflation works is it gives purchasing power, the ability to buy goods and services to the government by slowly eating away or deteriorating what everyone else can buy with their money. So when the government prints more, or in
Yeah.
our case, the Federal Reserve prints more,
Right.
in part so they can buy up all these government bonds, then suddenly our dollars are worth less money,
Right.
and the federal government can get the benefit of that initial spending.
Stephen Roberts is my guest. He is an economics professor at Geneva College. The program is Teleforum. In general, what is the state of our economy right now?
So there's a few, it's kind of mixed
From
signals.
from an expert, because I see people screaming and yelling this, that, and the other, and this is bad. And most of the people that I hear yelling the most aren't economists or somebody that wants your vote. I want to hear from an economist.
Yeah, so one thing is there are very mixed signals. So
Okay.
I think it's hard to say that the economy is in a very good or very bad condition right now. In fact, the word I might use is precarious. The economy is in a bit of a...
Now that's scary.
Yeah,
All right.
but you're not falling yet, right?
This is the part where they take you to the top and let you dangle for a little bit before they pull the pin. Is that where we are economically?
Maybe a little bit. And so the question is, and if you read the literature, the word they like to use is soft landing. That's what they're targeting, a soft landing. So there is this concern about what's going to happen, especially as we start increasing interest rates to control inflation. Right now, the unemployment rate is almost the lowest it's been in the past 50 years. All right.
Yeah.
Barring 1 or 2 months a few years ago, this is a kind of historically low unemployment rate. So in terms of that economic indicator, things look great. But as we've been seeing for the last 6 or 8 months, you've got the stock market in decline. You've got inflation remaining high despite the Fed finally starting to try to control it, and those are worrying signs. And so the question is, how hard is it going to be for us to bring inflation down? If you look at some of the history, like the early 1980s, there was a rough couple of years getting inflation under control, and that's what we're hoping to avoid.
How much does a political administration have to do with this? I'm not picking one or the other, but you pay attention to this. If things are going well, it's the person in charge is causing it. If things are going poorly, the person in charge is messing up. When it comes to the economy, how much can an administration do to help or accidentally hurt it?
A lot less than most people think.
Okay.
That's the first thing. People will always talk about the president. First of all, most of what the president does is he responds to the spending bills of Congress. So if you want to blame someone in the government itself, it's usually what is Congress passing, although usually that obviously needs the approval of the president.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the inflation question in particular, the biggest thing the president does is they pick the Fed chairperson. And so the current Fed chairperson was selected by Trump. It's Jerome Powell.
Right.
Selected by Trump and then reappointed by Biden. And what's interesting is there were many who were maybe on the extreme left wing of Biden's party that didn't like Powell, and they wanted somebody that was maybe more progressive, that was going to be more concerned with things like the environment and less concerned with monetary policy. But oftentimes, this is one of the most bipartisan things that you'll see is the selection of the Fed chairperson, because it's not uncommon to see if someone is successful, both a Democratic president and a Republican president will continue to reappoint them, like Alan Greenspan in the 1990s.
I was going to say, wasn't he around for about 1,000 years? Seemed like it.
Yeah, I think he had maybe 3 different presidents that he worked under, 2 Bushes and Clinton in between.
Okay.
So if people believe in you, if they think that you're doing a good job, then Democrat, Republican, they will reappoint you. And a lot of we talked a little bit about what leads to inflation, like the increase in the money supply. A lot of those things were already set in motion before Biden took office. So the first
right,
spending
but that
bill,
information doesn't fit on a meme. Is that where we get lost?
Yeah, so it takes time for these things to have an impact. What we did in 2020 didn't have an immediate impact, but later in 2021, you start to see that impact. And so it's unfair to blame the current administration for things that were already underway. And I think if you really want to complain about inflation, you probably should be targeting the Fed chairperson and saying he didn't act soon enough. And I think there are some people even inside the Fed that will say we should have done more sooner to combat inflation.
All right. Last question. My guest has been Stephen Roberts. He is a professor, economics professor at Geneva. Will you come back sometime when I need schooled up on this? Because I've learned literally more talking to you in the last hour than I learned taking econ twice in school. You know what happens when you take it twice, right? It means that first time it didn't go well. Here's the last question. Please make me understand. What is cryptocurrency? Because I know what a cryptozoologist is. They're the people that go look for Bigfoot. Is that what cryptocurrency is? The money of Bigfoot? Is it completely made up? What is it?
It's not completely made up. It's a digital currency. Oftentimes it can be created through the use of your computer. There are computer processes in here. I should remind you that I didn't actually graduate as a computer science major.
Good.
So
that's good. That means you can explain it to me without breaking it down into if-then programs. That's good.
So the technical details make it so that it's limited how much can be created, and it's kind of an increasing cost. The more that gets created, the harder and harder it is to create future units. So one of the big criticisms, and this is related to things we've already touched on in the program, is the government can print what they want, and that makes people concerned about government currencies.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin being the kind of the classic example, they have a limited rate of growth, and they actually have a limited endpoint. So you can't have infinite Bitcoin the way it's set up. And so a lot of people like that because it means that they're not beholden to any government to actually have a good monetary policy or keep with what they should be doing.
It's its own independent thing, completely removed from the Federal Reserve or whatever your country's version is.
Correct. It's completely independent, and it can be created by individual users. These days, it's very, very computer intensive, and so it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of computing power to continue to mine Bitcoin. 15 years ago, you maybe could run it on your home desktop. You could mine a reasonable amount. These days, you have to have much more intensive technology. And so with cryptocurrency, one of the big advantages, as I've already mentioned, is the fact that there's kind of a natural control as to how fast the currency can increase. And the other thing is it allows for much easier and, in many cases, safer online transactions. So it's very popular when moving money between countries or engaging in online business deals. Cryptocurrency is considered a lot safer than many of the other forms of payment.
Does it become more legitimate as people just simply decide to view it as more legitimate?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the number one thing that you need for any type of money is that people view it as legitimate. And so for cryptocurrency in particular, this is a big question. How much of the world is going to decide this is a legitimate currency? And I think the value of Bitcoin rises and falls on the answer to that particular question.
Stephen Roberts has been my guest. Thank you for coming in. You'll come back?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I got schooled up big time. Economics professor at Geneva College. I now know what a bull market is.
You don't have to have had an accident, suffered a sports injury, or undergone surgery to take advantage of the benefits of physical therapy from Dale Reckless